Can you advance to the next? Oh, there we go. Okay. So here's our agenda for today. First, we're going to go through the basic information about our program and the upcoming RFR. We're also going to spotlight some key things we're looking for, including project themes. We'll also be going through some tips to make the applications more competitive. At the very end, we'll have a general question answer period and then go into breakout room with our regional coordinators, as well as other members of the CZM StormSmart team. And so there you can discuss your project ideas as well as any other specific questions. Yeah, and these are some of the people that you will be meeting with as needed. Okay, next slide.
Sorry for the delay.
That's okay. Okay, so these are the main goals for our program. They've been pretty much the same ever since we started in 2014. In our program, we want to address both current and future coastal flooding, erosion, sea level rise issues, and this can be from an area of focus as a specific site or parcel all the way up to the regional scale. We really want to protect public facilities and critical infrastructure, as well as providing broad public benefits and access to our coastal resources. We also really want to emphasize our support of adaptation of environmental justice communities. Next slide, please. So these are our numbers over the last 10 years of the grant, which again started in 2014. We've awarded over $52 million with over $17 million in local match. You can explore all these projects with our CZM grant viewer, which is pictured to the left there. We'll distribute a link, but you can also just Google CZM grant viewer and it should come up in the search results. And in that grant viewer, you can explore our projects by town, year, and project type and get an idea of what we've funded in the past. Next slide, please. So this is a chart showing how much we've been requested with our applications versus how much we were able to award. As you can see, last year the number of requests really exploded. So it was a very competitive round, and we anticipate that to continue this year. We're going to have about $4 or $5 million available to award this year, with a project cap at $2 million, which is the same as last year. Next slide, please. So our match requirements over the years has varied, going as high as 25%. But this year, we're actually going to stick with a 10% requirement across the board, which we started last year. Next slide, please. So in terms of eligibility, these funds are available to our coastal municipalities, as well as nonprofits, which include tribal entities and federally recognized Massachusetts tribes. And overall, we're looking for 5 project types, which are vulnerability and risk assessment, public outreach, proactive planning, retrofit and relocation, and shoreline restoration. And so now I'm going to go through some basic information about each project type. Next slide, please. So our first one is detailed risk and vulnerability assessments. These really establish the baseline for communities on what's vulnerable now and in the future, and helps them decide on where to invest. We really are looking to align these projects with our current upcoming Resilient Coasts initiative. Next slide, please. Next, we have public education and outreach. So this kind of project is created to help communities better understand the risks ahead of them and empowering them with that knowledge to make their community more resilient. So we have funded things like middle school curriculums and interactive websites, as well as physical exhibits. Project category is proactive planning. And these kinds of projects, we're looking to help communities change policies and implement processes that help the community more holistically prepare for climate change, such as stricter building codes or zoning or planning, phase managed relocation. Yeah, and usually this would include a really strong public outreach effort in addition. So project categories are not siloed off together. Often we see projects that contain more than one category. Next slide, please. Then our next project category is retrofits and relocations. This is a little bit more construction focused and is focused on protecting vulnerable public infrastructure, which is those listed right now, listed on the slide. We would definitely encourage people to consider nature-based alternatives in these slides, so it's not required. Next slide, please. And our final project category is shoreline restoration, which is also construction focused and is definitely really geared towards nature-based solutions, not gray infrastructure, such as living shorelines and beach nourishment. They really want to enhance the natural system with vegetation and sediment to curb the erosion flooding that you're seeing. Next slide, please. So these are the typical phases of a project that we fund. Typically, we usually only fund 1 or 2 of these phases at a time due to the time constraint of the grant, which can be only 9 or 10 months from when the contract is awarded in the fall. So usually we aim to have the awards in August or September, and then they would go all the way to June 30th of the following year. So because that short time period, we've had multiple projects come through that we've actually funded through multiple grant rounds, starting all the way from the planning phase, moving all the way through to construction. So I'd like to emphasize that you don't have to do all these phases of the project with us, and you certainly do not have to do them all in one go. You can come in with a construction shovel-ready project, but just make sure that you submit documentation that you've done all the previous phases and have the permitting lined up. So overall, while the permitting and construction phases are typically done in separate cycles, we would say that you can combine the planning and design phases into one application. Next slide, please. So to go over the timeline, we will be releasing the RFR this spring, and you're free to reach out and talk with us about your application as much as you like and get feedback up until it's released. But when the RFR is released, we will only be able to take formal written questions for the following 2 weeks. So at that point, we would ask you to send your formal questions to our Coastal Resilience email, and then we'll respond and put those answers up on the website. And then 6 weeks from the release, that's when the applications will be due. And then, like I said, we hope to have the award announcement by late summer, which would be August kind of timeframe. And then from there, we would do project scoping and actually get the contract signed through the early fall. And then the official project start date, which is when you can actually count activities towards the grant, would start on the date of EEA signature on your contract in early fall. And then all project activities would go through to June 30th, 2026, or June 30th, 2027 for 2-year contracts, which we do accept as well. Yeah, and that June 30th deadline is really important. We absolutely cannot extend any projects past that point. Okay, next slide, please. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tricia.
All right, great. Thanks, India. Our RFR every year outlines the specific criteria that we competitively evaluate applications on. So those are listed on the screen. Climate adaptation, this is just a description of the climate impacts on the project area and your approach to addressing those impacts over the long term. We look for the climate projections that you may be using and a planning time horizon, and an explanation of the current and future, likely future vulnerability to public safety, natural resources, and infrastructure. We also look for a description of the current financial and technical capacity and need for assistance. And we also reserve 5 out of 10 points here to projects that increase the resilience of environmental justice populations, or are led by or engage with environmental justice populations. Next, we have a criteria for you to really spell out the work of the project and the level of effort involved in all of the project tasks that you propose. So we're looking for details on the methodology, clearly defined deliverables, and a description of who is doing the work and how you're going to fulfill the deliverables that you propose. Here we also look for a map of the proposed project footprint and a description of ownership. Next, the public benefit and interests. This is a description of how your project provides resilience benefits at the project site or adjacent to the site or at a regional scale. We are really interested in regional projects and how those benefit members of the community and of the Commonwealth. Transferability, this is really a description of your education and outreach efforts that you will take to transfer project information, results and products to other communities that may be experiencing similar issues. Project management, here we are looking for just the name of your project manager who will be kind of in charge of your project at the local level with a capacity to manage the project for the duration of the grant. Regional projects and partnerships, this is where we're giving more focus to those projects that demonstrate strong regional partnerships and provide regional benefits. This can be demonstrated through strong letters of support by all participants in your project. Timeline and budget are really important. We're looking for realistic deliverable due dates for each task and for each subtask of your project. Timelines can be on a 1 or 2 year cycle. If you are going for a 2-year project, it's really important that you break down the tasks and deliverables by fiscal year. So being very clear on what work you propose to complete by the end of the first fiscal year, and then which products are going to be completed in the second fiscal year. The funds do not automatically roll into the second fiscal year if you are going for a 2-year timeline. So just be very cautious about that as you are developing your budgets, that you want to be sure you're coming in with accurate budgets as far as what you expect to complete within each year. I'll get into detailed and cost-effective budgets on the next slide, but we are looking for a detailed breakdown of costs for each task. These need to be tied to the deliverables and clearly explain how the cost justifies the deliverable that's being proposed. And overall project quality, this isn't necessarily something that you have to write out on your application. It's really the evaluator's overall score, looking at the project overall in terms of its feasibility and criticality and level of completeness in terms of the quality of the application and clarity of the work that's proposed. So a few notes on developing a cost-effective budget. We really encourage applicants to reach out to CZM early in your project to obtain technical assistance. We want to work with you, and we help, we try to flag issues that may come up so that those can be addressed along the way. Sometimes if it gets to a point where you're far along in the project and there's an issue, then it requires going back and having to redo work. So working with us to get that feedback and input early on can help avoid redoing work or completing redundant tasks along the way. We also like to see projects that build off of previous work completed and projects that focus on feasible solutions. We're really interested in getting projects implemented and constructed. So focusing on work that does work toward that goal makes for a more competitive application. Like I said before, we are very interested in deliverables that are clearly defined for each task and that help to move the project forward. Also, for a cost-effective budget, look for ways to leverage partnerships to maximize the grant and match funds and be able to share resources for equipment and supplies. And carefully itemize all of the work that's involved and be clear about the level of effort. And this is usually something that factors in the complexity of the project as well. So just make sure you discuss that in the application. And in the budget, include the number of staff and hours required to fulfill those deliverables. Also, clearly define the roles and responsibilities of staff. And we've also seen that when projects include a mix of staff experience, it can help balance out the costs. So you may have some more entry-level career staff and some more senior level staff that can help balance costs out for various tasks. And finally, we encourage applicants to prioritize virtual meetings, although we do know that in-person travel is also essential. So doing that for site work or when collaboration is required is fine. But when you do propose travel, explore the group travel and other cost-effective options. I have an example budget. This is a construction project, and I just wanted to highlight sort of what we're looking for when we do review the scope of work and the budgets. And just to give you a level, a more detailed look at kind of what we expect for the level of detail. So here are two tasks, project bidding and dune construction. You can see that the tasks are broken out into more discrete, smaller tasks. So think about kind of the order of operations and the sequence of work, and try to aim for including those more intermediate milestones in your scopes. And you'll also notice that we have very tangible, concrete deliverables listed for each subtask. I do want to also highlight when you do have meetings to include meeting summaries as a deliverable, not just a sign-in sheet or agenda. We really want some documentation of what was discussed. And we have a very detailed deliverable due date and reimbursement request due date. When it comes to construction and you have a very high cost project, it's okay to break that into more frequent installments. So that helps communities be able to submit more reimbursement requests along the way. And that may take some burden off of any cash flow issues if that's an issue. If that's something that you're going to pursue, just be sure that you can still have a tangible deliverable for each of those subtasks. I'm going to get into regional projects and partnerships, since this is something that we are interested in working with communities on. What we mean by a regional project, these are communities that are working together. They share boundaries, they're working across systems, such as they're together in an abatement or a littoral cell. And they're working to address similar issues and have similar resiliency goals. These projects often require a lot of coordination over multiple project phases, but I do want to highlight some of the benefits of regional projects, in that they can be more cost efficient by being able to leverage those partnerships and resources. These projects can help increase transferability and provide larger public benefits by being able to address a larger climate impact. And by holding joint meetings together, you can be more consistent in information and project messaging to the public. One example of a regional outreach project was in Essex County. This was a project led by the Essex County Greenbelt Association. They worked with the City of Gloucester and Town of Essex on a project where they were looking to help the municipalities prioritize parcels that may be suitable for providing flood storage capacity and coastal resiliency. So they did a GIS exercise where they layered data layers and came up with ranking mechanisms to develop maps based on parcel priority. They also created some good outreach products, and I have the links to a story map and video that you can explore when you get the slides with the links. Another regional project example, this was undertaken by the New Bedford Port Authority and Fairhaven. This project is in a designated port area, or DPA. They performed underwater and topside inspections of marine infrastructure at the municipally owned and managed piers in New Bedford and Fairhaven, as well as New Bedford's South Terminal. They considered these results in relation to projected sea level rise and worked to identify upgrades for the infrastructure and develop long-term recommendations. So I do just want to acknowledge that we do allow projects in DPAs. Communities can also work with property owners and tenants to in DPAs to help increase awareness of risk, develop plans for flood preparedness, plan for temporary relocation of assets, and deploy temporary flood barriers. In Marshfield and Duxbury, this is an example of a regional shoreline restoration project. The towns worked together over the course of 4 years. So they phased their project from planning and feasibility assessment, design and permitting, and construction. Marshfield is actually in its 5th year of this project, with construction to increase the volume of the sediment. This project helps restore an eroding beach in front of publicly owned seawalls to help restore the function of the beach and provide resiliency to the shore protection structure and landward development. I also want to highlight the town's website. They do a really great job of providing periodic updates with links to their presentations and reports. And they have a frequently asked question site that has been very beneficial to the project and in gathering public support for moving the project forward. A few application tips. These are things that we usually cover every year, but they remain the same for helping to create competitive applications. We always say to write your application assuming that the review committee doesn't have any project background. Our review committee does change every year, so it's not just CCM staff. We pull in representatives from other agencies who may not have background or be familiar with your project. So just be careful to really present the context of the project and rationale behind it. Once you do complete your project, just go back, check for consistency between what you put in the narrative and making sure that everything is covered in your scope and budget. Also, we encourage applicants to develop discrete tasks and deliverables by fiscal year. In the case that we are able to provide a partial award, having a greater breakdown of the tasks makes that easier to do so, to select a chunk of work that might be suitable for partially funding. I already kind of talked about developing the tangible deliverables that help move the project forward. It's really important to develop a realistic timeline and budget. With projects beginning in the early fall and have until the end of June, that is only 8 months or so that you have to work, unless you're going for a 2-year timeline. So anticipate time that it might take to secure a contractor for your project. And also build in time to have your project management team review deliverables and other materials that you may be finalizing or presenting to the public. We also recommend holding regular project management team meetings. Typically a monthly basis is sufficient for making sure your team stays on track with your scope and budget and checking in on the status of deliverables. Again, we do require the 10% of total project cost match. So if you are planning to use cash for that, just anticipate the time to secure that if you do need to go to town meeting to vote on it. And reach out early to your local departments, make sure they're in support of the project, coordinate with them to obtain letters of support. And we look for projects that also provide meaningful and accessible opportunities for public engagement. So that means offering translation services when necessary during public meetings or with your final deliverables. We have a list of climate resources in the RFR and on our website. I do just want to point out our DPA guidance for building resilience with the link there. And if you are looking for some assistance on characterizing climate impacts and hazards in your area, our Office of Climate Science would be available to help you with that. And their email is climatescience@mass.gov. I also want to point out a few environmental justice resources. These are also on our website and in our RFR, and can help you think about ways to engage with those populations. And finally, like India said earlier, we are available to provide feedback on proposals up until our RFR is released. So please reach out to us and your regional coordinator if you would like to discuss a project idea. We also have an optional expression of interest form. It's a Microsoft form that you can submit, what you're proposing to come in for. And this is for the Resilience and Coastal Habitat and Water Quality grant. So we'll be reviewing those and we'll reach out to you to provide feedback on those. But that is optional and that is new this year. And I just want to say thank you to all of the partners who have been involved in our grant projects, from watershed groups, nonprofit organizations, and consultants. It's just really great to see so much work being done from various levels. So thank you.